Hi, I'm Dr. Von Hansen from Washburn University, and I'm going to talk to you about preparing the drum set charts for the 2020 KMEA Jazz Band auditions. So there's 5 different tunes in this packet that have different styles and different difficulties. Let's start with the first one, which is Bassy Straight Ahead, which is exactly what it sounds like, just a straight ahead swing chart. So this introduction at the top in this style in this time period, we're often going to play on the hi-hat. So one thing that we need to focus on is when the hi-hat's open and when it's closed. We want it closed only on beat 2 and 4, and then open on the off beat and on 1 and 3. So we have that accent on 2 and 4. Sounds like this. Something that people do that often sounds wrong is only opening on 1 and 3. It puts the emphasis on 1 and 3 instead of 2 and 4. Right? Sounds cheesy, sounds open on 1 and 3. So we need to put that emphasis on 2 and 4. Notice I'm also using my hand to help close that up, and I'm not opening my hat all the way. I don't have this sound. We don't want that high pitch of the hi-hat. We want the sizzle of them touching together a little bit. So keep them together. You can close it a little bit with your hand. Accent only 2 and 4. Open up on the other beats. So the biggest thing that you have to do on this tune is show off your ability to play and set up these ensemble figures that are written throughout. So the first thing you need to figure out is whether the band is playing a short or a long sound. If they're playing a long sound, we're often going to play a bass drum with a cymbal, and if they're playing a short sound, we're often going to play a snare drum. This is really made clear in notation many times, but if not, you should go listen to the band. You should always listen to the band anyway. So on this, we can go listen to the track and hear whether they're playing short and long. A good example of this is the bar before B, where you can see there's a little setup figure on 1, but then the offbeat of 1 is a long sound, 3 is a long sound, and then the and of 4 is a short sound. So we're going to play that as a long, long, short, and then get back to our ride. So moving along, at C, it shows something. We don't always play exactly what the composer writes, but on this tune, it has become kind of tradition that we do play this snare bass thing. While we're playing on the ride cymbal. So we do what's called a short long. So we go long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, back and forth between the snare and the bass drum. So the next thing that happens in this 4th bar is now we have to set up a large hit with a written out solo fill. So we need to make sure that we know where our fill is going to end. We need to show the band where they're going to play. So on these offbeat hits, we need to show them where the beat before their offbeat is. So on this 5th bar, they hit on the offbeat of 1. So we need to end our fill on 1, often with a snare drum hit, a nice rim shot, or we can end on a bass drum, but we need to give them something real strong on 1 so they know that it's 1 and they know where that hit is. Okay? Moving on from there, we have a series of long hits, and of 1, 3, and of 4, 2, that we can put little fills in between. We don't want to get too wild in here. We want to just make sure that we're given some good information to set up between there. So something that I really noticed in here is at the end of that line, so we have this drag, and then there's a hit on a quarter note that looks the same as the rest, but if you listen to the track, it's actually a short note, so I play that on the snare drum instead of another crash on the cymbal. The next thing that this points out is we're moving from forte into a mezzo forte at D for these last 2 bars. So your fills have to follow the shape of the music. We don't just get to fill and play loud and be animal on the drums. You have to be musical and shape and move the music. So we're going to decrescendo our fill into D to lead that. Something that's really nice if you just follow this da-da, 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 and just play that on the hat. It's a real nice reduction of sound into D there. The last thing that I want to point out about these ensemble hits in this tune is these 2 bars before E. This is where we don't necessarily have to play what the composer wrote. So there's a roll written in here. You can play a roll. Rolls are a great fill setup source, but you don't really have to play that. What happens is the band hits a hit on the and of 1, 2 before E, and then they hit a hit on the and a 4, the bar before E. So basically what I do is I set up that hit 2 before, and then I play a fill in the bar before E that ends on 4, and then a hit on the offbeat of 4. So all I'm doing is doing normal fills to set up. I don't necessarily play that roll that is written within there. So we apply that throughout this whole tune, and then we get something that sounds like this. I'll Never Smile Again is your chance to show off that you can play in a slow ballad style. You can do this with sticks, or you could play some brushes to show off to the judges that you know how to play brushes. If I'm going to play with brushes, I'll switch to sticks at D, so when I have these forte and fortissimo hits, I can have a little bit more sound production. If I'm going to play with brushes, I'm going to show off that I can play a few different patterns, not just to show off technique, but also to outline the form. So I might play one pattern at A and then switch my pattern at B to show that we're in a B section, just like you might change a symbol if you were playing cymbals to outline the form. And then when we go back to the A section at C, maybe I'll go back to my first pattern again. So a few patterns you can try out. Just our basic ballad swing pattern where we have a half note in our left hand as we're stirring on the drum. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So stirring means just making this sound here. On 2 and 4, I'm going to press into the drum a little bit more to get an accent in my left hand. And then I'm just going to play the swing pattern in my right hand. I'll demonstrate this on the floor tom so you can see it. Okay, so another pattern you can do that I really like on ballads are these interlocking C's, where we're just going back and forth with 2 C's. So when I'm on beat 1, my right hand is on top. When I'm on beat 2, my left hand's on top. And if I want to play an offbeat, it's always on the bottom. So that can be really nice. Okay, one more pattern you could do is just 2 circles that are moving towards each other, towards your body. So my right hand's going counterclockwise, my left hand's going clockwise. Okay, so if I'm a judge and I'm listening to this tune, my number one thing that I'm listening to is your time, because this is the only tune that we're playing slow. So we want to make sure that you have good time and you can play slow but with intensity. So one thing with this that we need to know is, what is the distance of the swing? So that third triplet can change depending on the style. On Basie Straight Ahead, it's an older style, it's a faster tune, it's a pretty tight swing, da 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 da. But on this, we're slowing down, and they make the swing a little bit more laid back, a little bit more open, da 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 da, a little bit more open, a little bit more laid back. So you need to listen to the bass player and follow how they're playing their swing. This goes for when you're playing in your groups too. The bass player and the drummer need to set what the distance of the swing is depending on the tune. So as we're going through here, you notice there's a bunch of notated ensemble figures throughout here. If you played every one of these ensemble figures, let's say you're going to play them all on the snare drum, it's just way too much. We're not going to play every one of these notes. It's basically just showing you the melody in rhythm on there. So we need to pick out which ones are more important and what we want to bring out through that. So something we can do to accentuate the lesser important ones without bringing a bunch of attention to them is either do it with comping on our snare drum and bass drum, or we can do a little shoulder crash, which is just using the side of our stick across the bow of the cymbal here rather than a full crash, which is more against the edge. We're just going to have the shoulder crash that I can do while I'm swinging. Just a little bit into the cymbal there. Just has a little extra emphasis without being a full crash, and I'm not setting up a fill. So if I was to play the third line here, I'm going to just do some comping and shoulder crash on everything except for the and of 4 in the second from last, so 2 before B, that and of 4. That one sounds like an ensemble figure to me. Everything else I'm just doing through shoulder crashes and the snare drum. Okay, so you could hear I'm just playing snare drum, cymbal, a little bit of shoulder crash, and then I have a little setup to that and of 4. So that brings me to the setups of our figures here. You're not going to play as much as you would on bassy straight ahead. There's no place in here where I'm going to play a full bar fill because it doesn't fit the style. They're more like 1 beat fills, sometimes stretching in to 2 beats. So really just or into these offbeats, I'm just playing just a little bit of information to get into that fill, but not getting away from the swing and setting the style. I want to hear your style more than your ability to fill on this. If I'm listening to this as a judge, I heard your fills on the first tune. I want to hear style and feel and character throughout this tune. So I would focus on those things throughout this one. Rhythm is in here to show that you can play a basic medium tempo samba pattern. So what you need to know is just a few do's and don'ts on the samba pattern. First, what is a basic samba pattern? It's really based off of this bass drum pattern, boom, 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 which is what the bass player is playing to, boom, 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 and we're outlining that with our bass. We're kind of imitating a surdo, which is like a big, really floor tom slash bass drum thing that they're playing in the actual street samba stuff that they play during Carnival, which is multiple hundreds of people playing lots of instruments. With the ride cymbal, we're kind of outlining some shakers and things that they do. At this tempo, you could play all of the 8th notes, or you can play going along with your feet. This is a really common thing that is done in a samba rather than a bossa nova, which is where we often play all the eighth notes in a bossa nova. The number one thing that I would say is don't play an Afro-Cuban clave over the top. So like a 3-2 son clave. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So like I said, that's Afro-Cuban. So think about the languages spoken there. So Afro-Cuban, we're speaking Spanish here. Samba is a Brazilian pattern, which would be Portuguese. So I'm speaking Portuguese here and Spanish here. So we're speaking two different languages. And people who know what they're listening to, that's really off-putting. So make sure that you know what you're doing there. You can play what we call a Brazilian clave by moving one note. So the last part of the 2 of the 3-2 son clave, if you move it over 1/8 note, we have this Brazilian clave of, here's the son clave. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. We move that last one. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1. Okay, so we move that to the and of 3 instead of on 3, and it creates this kind of shifting of the pattern. It feels like you don't quite know where the downbeat is. It feels a little bit more smooth, and it fits within this style better. The only other thing that you really need to pay attention to in this tune is just a few places where you can kind of play some ensemble figures, and they're just outlined with accents. So there's a few, about 4 or 5 accents throughout this that you need to play some sort of a shoulder crash. Maybe you do a little setup into it. And then there's a unison figure on the second line. You want to make sure you outline that unison figure. The only other thing is play a little fill and a crash into the B section so you can outline the form. Make sure that we're outlining the form and showing that as a drummer we know where the form is. Is marked as a hip hop, and that means a really specific thing when we're playing with a big band or a combo. They're really often talking about a swung feel, more old school hip hop stuff where we're in a halftime, so we're playing the snare drum on 1 and 3. So on the hi-hat. So it's a swung pattern. We're playing in swing. So our fills need to be in triplets. And really often we're playing and accentuating the offbeats within those fills. Not a ton of downbeats. We keep everything bouncy and up by playing on those offbeats. Just like in Rio Rhythm, outside of playing the style, we need to focus on hitting some of these ensemble figures that are written in with accents and that you can hear within the tracks. You need to listen and follow what's being accentuated by the piano player and the bass. One thing that's different here, there's a little bit more ensemble figures on this one than Rio Rhythm, especially at B. There's a stop time on the first bar and the 9th bar, where we have this ba-ka-doo-bop, 1, 2, 3, 1. So I'm playing 1, 2, nothing, then I'm playing, coming back in on the and a 3. If I'm doing that in the 10th bar, I come in on beat 4 and then come back into my groove. In this B section, there's a lot more ensemble figures that are being set up, so much that in the last 6 bars, I'm almost consistently filling as I'm going back and forth through those, bringing out each one of those ensemble figures to make that head sound like we're playing all together as a group. Voyage Home is basically an imitation of the tune Maiden Voyage by Herbie Hancock. So you should go listen to that whole album, Maiden Voyage by Herbie Hancock. Listen to the whole album. This is an album you should know as a jazz drum set player. So what they're doing is they're bringing out this bass pattern that is played on that tune by playing a similar thing, which has just a little couple changes on here. But what we need to know as a drummer is we're playing a medium bossa, but we don't get to play the bossa pattern, which is just like our samba pattern. Boom, 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 boom. And we're playing straight eighth notes on the cymbal. We don't really get to do that. We need to outline what's written here. Bum, bum, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and. We need to outline that with our bass drum. So we're going to play that pattern on the bass drum while we play our ride cymbal and the left hand over the top of that. So a cool thing that you can do in this vamp, just playing straight quarter notes, just so we can hear the interplay with that, is really nice through there. And then it gives us a chance after the repeat sign to get a little bit more active, accentuate that pattern a little bit with the ride cymbal, comp a little bit more with the left hand, but we're still constantly playing that pattern with our right foot until we get to the third line. It's not notated there anymore, and you can hear the group just goes into a straight bossa. Bum, 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 bum. So you need to go to just a basic bossa pattern. Dum, 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 throughout there. And you can play that Brazilian clave that we talked about with the samba, but also just comping a little bit with your left. For both the Rio rhythm and this, it would be good to learn how to make sure that you can just comp and play basically what you want with your left hand, just like you would with a swing pattern. So developing that left hand independence is really important. The only other thing you need to know about this tune is the first ending. There's a few hits there that you have to outline, and a 2, and a 4, and a 2. You need to set those up a little bit, play them on a cymbal, and that's the whole tune. It's really focused on you continuing to play that bass drum pattern that's written out here. Some overall thoughts on this audition and for playing drum set in general. Your number one job is playing in time. You need to maintain that when you're playing your swing pattern, and then when you're playing your fills, you have to be right in time all the way through, land on the right beat right in time, and hit right with the band, or in this case, right with the track. You need to maintain that good time all the way through. Your second thing is playing with the right feel and the right time. So the right feel is kind of how we talked about the distance of the triplet. You need to make sure you're maintaining the correct distance of the triplet and matching the group. The style, you want to make sure if you're playing a groove in Rio rhythm, you play a fill, you got to go right back into your samba pattern and make sure you stay within the style. So your fills should be something that you're showing off here, right? It's an audition. You want to show off that you have all these chops, but if you don't play those with good time and good feel and within the style of the tune, then it doesn't matter. If I'm playing I'll Never Smile Again and I play this big loud fill, it's not going to work. You need to stay within the style of the tune, within the purpose of the fill. So if the purpose of the fill is to decrescendo, you need to follow that. So time, feel, style. Those are your number one things you need to focus on. And then you have some fun because you get to play some drums. The final thing that I want to point out, if you listen to me playing these tracks, you can hear just that separated track like they're asking you to send in. I have another video about how to separate those and how to do some free video editing where you can take the sound of the track and stick it underneath the sound of you playing the drum set and have that be a nice mix for your judges to hear. So go check out that other video that I put up there so you can figure out how to do that and make your audition sound the best it can. Have fun.